In today's video, I'm going to be unpacking a really deep term in the healing world, embodied healing. It's a term that gets bandied about a lot in the healing circles, but it's so deep. There's so much there that I want to unpack that today. And so before we get there, I'm Dr. Jay Eaker from the BioSoul Integration Center in Louisville, Colorado, and I help people embody their soul's gifts and their soul's essence so they can share those gifts on the planet. That's really what embodied healing is about. And so if you find this video on YouTube, please like it there, please share it, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. That's very helpful. And if you see this, wherever you see this, you might see it on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Pinterest, etc. Please do the social thing there, like it, share it, pass it along to those who you think might need this information. Also, this gets syndicated into an audio podcast. This video does, so you can find this episode and any of my episodes at the BioSoul Integration Podcast, wherever you listen to your audio podcasts. I've also written a book called If It Didn't Hurt, How to Resolve Your Pain and Discover Your Life Purpose. And that is kind of the ultimate guide towards embodied healing, and really gives a lot more detail actually than what I'll be talking about today. So if what you hear today in this video entices you, check out my book at my website, biosoulintegration.com, and there you can get the first chapter of that book for free if you want to check it out, or you can buy it there in all of its forms: ebook, audiobook, paperback. And again, it's kind of the ultimate guide towards embodied healing. So okay, let's get into it. Embodied healing, again, it's such a deep term. There's just so much there. I've spent the last 20 years or so helping people embody their soul's gifts and kind of really grasping what that really means, embodied healing. And so in order to kind of unpack that, I want to kind of talk about each of those terms, because like I said, you could make a whole video on embodied, embodiment, what that means, and a whole video on healing, obviously. So I'm going to kind of break those terms up to talk about them. First, I want to talk about embodied. What's that? What does that really mean? Involves the body somehow, right? In some way. So in order to unpack that, I want to talk about the idea of the body-mind, or the mind-body, body/mind, body-mind, right? The idea behind that phrase is that it's the same thing, right? The body and the mind are the same thing. But have you ever really thought about how that is or what that means? I think certainly myself in my past, really, I've said body mind, used that phrase, that term, but when it came down to it, I saw the body and the mind separately. And again, they're the same thing. They're one and the same. How is that? So when we think about the mind, we think about thoughts, right? But what are thoughts? Thoughts, if you pay close enough attention, you'll find that thoughts are composed of images that appear in your mind's eye, in that sort of movie screen, you know, behind your eyes. There are images that appear. There is talk. There's a voice that is constantly talking to us, repeating, running, sort of like running a tape, running the tapes that we play about who we are and what this world is, and what I look out here and I see a Jeep, and there's a voice in my head that says Jeep. So there's talk and there's images that kind of compose thoughts that are constantly going on. And then there are emotions, and I would say emotions are kind of a bridge between the body and the mind in that phrase, body-mind. Because emotions, it kind of gets us closer to paying attention to our body, right? If you're really experiencing a strong emotion, I think most people are more aware of the fact that that involves their body somehow. And in fact, the truth is that emotion arises from energy, a foundation, a bed of energy, of life force energy that arises in the body. In fact, the truth is that all of these things do. the emotions arise from this bed of energy, life force energy that arises from the body, but so do thoughts, and so do the images, and so does the talk that compose the thoughts in our heads. They also arise out of this bed of life force energy that arises from the body. And I think as adult humans, though, we have this kind of, the thought channel is really ingrained in us adult humans. We relate to the world a lot through thought. And I think often people, if they know they're happy or they're sad or they're angry or whatever, because largely they're thinking happy or sad or angry thoughts. But the truth is, again, it arises out of a sense, an energy that arises from the body. And key to that is sort of being aware of this energy, being aware of the energy that rises up out of the body, that is sort of supporting the emotions, it's supporting the thoughts. And actually that's what embodiment is, when we are sort of aware of that whole spectrum of energy in the body that turns into emotions, that also fuels images and talk. That's really what it means to be embodied, that we sort of are aware of all of that whole spectrum of manifestation of life force energy that arises from our body. But the way that we get disembodied, you might say, the way that we, and so when we're aware of that whole range of manifestation of life force energy, that's when we're embodied. But something happens early on, as soon as our nervous system starts to develop in the womb, 2 to 4 months after conception. We start feeling into the energetic back office. We're relating directly to that life force energy that arises in our body and the information contained in it. And what we notice from feeling into the people in the world around us is that those people who we rely on for our survival, they have pushed away, they've judged certain flavors of that energy, certain parts of themselves and the energy that's associated with it. They've pushed those parts of themselves away. They've judged those parts. They've sequestered those parts with the way they're holding themselves, their posture. They use muscle tension to wall off certain parts of themselves and the energy associated with it, because that was deemed unsafe to feel. And because we rely on them for our survival, we do the same thing. We adopt that way of relating to the energy in our body and the parts of ourselves related to that energy. And so like I just mentioned there, which I didn't mention earlier, when we're talking about the body, it also involves our posture. It also involves tension in our body. The physical structure of our body is sort of gets tied into these survival patterns and how we push parts of ourselves away. And that is, there's in doing that, what happens is we are sort of, awareness gets drained out of a certain aspect of our being. We're sort of pinching it off. We're not aware of it. We can't express it. We're trying to sequester it and not pay attention to it, not look at it constantly. And so, when that's the case, when we're not aware of a part of ourselves and the energy associated with it, when we're pushing that away, we're not embodying. We're not fully embodied. We're disembodied. We're not fully embodying a part of ourselves. And again, that limit that we put on pushing a part of ourselves away, it again involves the way that we hold ourselves. It involves tension in our bodies. We put a limit on the range and depth of emotion we'll give ourselves permission to experience, and that also affects then the thoughts that we have, the stories that we constantly tell ourselves, the talk that's happening in our heads, the images that we see, and that affects, how we judge people, places, situations that we encounter in the outside world. And so that affects our behavior. We tend to behave in certain ways that that go along with that limited, defensive way of being. And so that really is the consequence of not embodying parts of ourselves, not being fully embodied. However, this way of doing things, now I want to talk about the healing part of that term, embodied healing. So this way of doing things, this way of being, where we're pushing parts of ourselves away and not allowing ourselves to come in contact with those parts, constantly trying to avoid them because we perceive that it's not safe to do so. That way of being kind of goes against the nature of nature. There's a way in which life is constantly nudging us towards coming into relationship with those parts of ourselves, those unembodied parts of ourselves, through the people, the situations, the circumstances, the things that it makes us feel. All those people, circumstances, situations, the things that those things make us feel, life is kind of nudging us towards coming into relationship with these unembodied parts of ourselves. And there's kind of a constant, strong pressure in that direction. And then there's this, baked in sort of resistance. Again, a certain part of our system is doing that, is holding parts of ourselves at bay out of a perceived need to survive. It's a defensive program. And so those two things are kind of at odds. The way that life is constantly pushing us to connect with parts of ourselves that we've tucked away and unfold those parts and come into relationship with the wisdom that those parts contain, and the way that we are constantly resisting that. It just creates friction. There's a friction there where ways that we're not embodying ourselves kind of create friction in life. And that shows up as suffering in a general term. Suffering. Ways that we're sort of resisting the flow of life. And so this term healing, the etymology of that word, the origin of that word, comes from an Old English word which means to become whole, to make whole. And that's what's happening. All these fragmented parts of ourselves, ways that we've pushed parts of ourselves away. Life is kind of trying to get us to integrate all those parts and bring all of those parts, welcome all those parts into the whole of our being. And so embodied healing, that's kind of, again, what embodied healing means then really is the sort of integration of all the separations that have occurred in our being, and being more aware, if not fully aware, of the sensations, the foundational manifestation of the life force energy that is arising in our body, that turns into sensations, that turns into emotions, that turns into images and talk in our heads, kind of being aware of that whole spectrum of the manifestation of life force energy in our body. That is what embodied healing is. So you might ask, how can I do that? How can I engage in this process of embodied healing? The truth is, like I said, there's a way in which life is nudging us towards embodiment all the time through contact with the persons, the places, the situations that we encounter in life. Life is kind of nudging us in that direction. So in some sense, you could say there's nothing that you need to do. because life is doing it anyway. But the more that you are aware of that, and the more awareness that you bring to that process, and the more awareness you bring to your body, the more it kind of lubricates and speeds up that process and makes it easier in ways. And so there are some things that are kind of key to that. And one of those things I would say is mindfulness. Mindfulness, again, when our system goes into defense, there's a way in which we are saying, oh, I don't want to feel this, I don't want to look at this. And again, maybe it happens, a lot of it happens, in fact, again, when we're in the womb, before we even have a chance to sort of like make a choice about it. It just happens. It's just, we entrain to the way that the people around us and the culture around us, how their system says, this part of me is okay, this part of me is not okay. We don't want to be aware of this part because that's unsafe to feel. So it happens long before there's any sort of thought that can be involved. It just happens automatically through instinct, sort of. And so there's a way in which we never really get to develop awareness. And so mindfulness is really about sort of like strengthening the muscle, the awareness muscle, like working out our attention, being able to sort of focus our attention in places and in ways that are relevant to the present moment. What is life asking us to pay attention, to be aware of in the present moment? And again, when we've created these survival patterns in our system that have us pushing parts of ourselves away, it's like that those attention muscles get weak or limp. It's like we just don't have the capacity to pay attention, to bring awareness to what is relevant to the present moment. And that's a lot of why there is pain, a lot of why we get overwhelmed in various situations, because we don't have the capacity to sort of pay attention to fully grasp all of the things that are happening in our bodies and in our lives. And when something that we've pushed away, let's say there's an emotion that we've said, oh, that's not safe to feel, that fear or whatever, that maybe some situation that we encounter brings that to the surface, and there's a program in us that says, no, it's not safe to feel that. That's what causes anxiety and depression, actually, is an inability to actually feel a thing, feel a very important part of our being, to come into relationship with a very important part of our being. So mindfulness is kind of like working out that muscle. It's like getting in the gym, exercising your attention muscle, your awareness muscle, so that you can bring your attention to and awareness to what life is asking us to pay attention to in any given moment. So I would say that mindfulness meditation, that is key. That is a sort of foundational key to this embodied healing and sort of inducing embodied healing. I think it's Eckhart Tolle. He's a author, spiritual teacher. He wrote The Power of Now. He wrote a book called A New Earth. He said something in his book that stuck with me and was a very important thing in my life, which is he said the most important thing that any human can do is to have at least part of their attention resting on their energy body at all times. Have at least part of their attention resting on the sensations of the energy in their body at all times. That is the most important thing that any human being can do, he said. And then there is help that we can get from others, right? There's body workers, there's therapists, there's chiropractors, there's acupuncturists, there's all of these things, all of these modalities that can help us with embodied healing. But because embodied healing involves that whole spectrum, awareness of sensations in the body, excuse me, how you're holding yourself, the tension that you hold in your body, the limit and range, the range and depth of emotion that you give yourself permission to feel, the stories that you tell yourself all the time, the images that you allow, that you believe or not, the thoughts that you buy into as they come into your heads, which supports your behavior. So, there's some practitioners that sort of lean towards one end of that, let's say, the thought spectrum. There's cognitive behavioral therapists, for instance. And then on the other end of the spectrum there, that are strictly working with the structure of your body, there's massage. And then there are sort of things that are kind of in the middle, There's chiropractic. There is more body-centered psychotherapy. There are different techniques like EMDR or brain spotting or parts work that are body-centered therapy modalities. There are techniques that sort of, bridge the body and the emotions. I would say the foundation for the work that I do is something called network chiropractic. That is a technique that sort of bridges more of it's not just the physical, the structure, like chiropractic mostly is. It includes emotions. It, to some degree, includes the thoughts. There's network spinal analysis is coupled with something called SRI, and SRI engages more of the thoughts, the talk, the stories that go along in your head. And so together, they create a pretty powerful tool for creating embodied healing. And the work that I do, which I call BioSoul integration, that I do here at my office, that I do online with folks, that also involves the body, connecting with the body and the energy there, but also including the emotions, including the thoughts and the stories that create the behavior in our lives, how we're showing up in our lives. So anything that you do, I would suggest that you sort of include, even if you, let's say you can't get away with just doing, if you want change in your life, if you want to change your consciousness in life, you can't get away with just doing massage, for instance. Or you can't get away, to be honest, with just doing therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy either. You might combine those two. You might do yoga and therapy. You might do massage and therapy. You might do, again, some version of therapy that's more body-centered. You might do some chiropractic version that's more that connects in with the emotions and the mind. So you might have to sort of put together a combination of things so that you can kind of touch on the whole spectrum of body and mind. Donald Epstein, the creator of this thing called network spinal analysis and SRI, he has created a concept that he calls the triad of change. And that it's like a triangle, and on one leg of the triangle is perception. On another leg of the triangle is behavior, and on the other leg of the triangle is structure. And the thing is that sort of like where we find ourselves is a combination of perception, structure, and behavior. And if you want to change where you are currently, it's sort of like we can, move up through the layers of consciousness, but every time we move up, we have to sort of affect this whole triangle. If you're only affecting one of those legs of the triangle, let's say you're only affecting structure, like you're just doing massage, for instance, or Rolfing, or kind of conventional chiropractic, that just affects the structure. But then there's all this momentum in the other two legs of that triangle, and perception and behavior that sort of reassert the other part of the triangle. And so you need to work on at least two of those legs to sort of collapse that triangle and make a fundamental change. But again, so you might want to do chiropractic and therapy of some sort. You might want to do yoga and EMDR or something like that. So a way that you can sort of affect more of the legs of that triangle. Okay, I think that's it. To recap, again, the body and the mind are the same thing. They're not separate. And we push away the energy at the source of our thoughts, of our emotions, because we feel like that energy, that part of ourselves is not safe to feel. And when we're doing that, we're not embodying ourselves. And that affects our behavior. That affects how we show up in the world, in relationship, at work, etc. Giving our gifts, our capacity to give our gifts. But again, there's a way in which life is constantly nudging us towards coming into relationship with those parts that we've pushed away. And ultimately, that's so that we can express our soul's gifts and our soul's essence through our physical body. I would say that's kind of the essence of embodied healing. So if you like this video, please like it, share it. Again, subscribe to my channel. Check out my book at www.biosoulintegration.com. Look for this podcast. Listen to this podcast wherever you listen to your audio podcasts. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video. And I look forward to helping you express more life. Have a great day.